The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
Indiana extends head football coach Curt Cignetti for the next 8 years.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Shout out to all of my everydayers who make Locked On Hoosiers your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. And there's a ton to talk about from this weekend. Indiana basketball looked pretty solid against South Carolina in what is going to be one of our only big tests in the non-conference slate. Plus, it's a huge week for Indiana football as Ohio State, the game we've been waiting for, it's finally here. Game week for Indiana and Ohio State. And now we get to go into a game like this knowing that our head coach isn't going anywhere. That's right. Head coach Curt Cignetti and Indiana come to an 8-year contract extension. 8 years, $72 million. That goes out to $8 million a year with the $1 million retention bonus per year. So this guy got paid. All right, good for Curt Cignetti, good for Indiana. This is good, I think, for pretty much all parties involved here because we've all known, right, that this year has been the best season in our history. I mean, I know that we have yet to have a ranked win. I know that we've even had some injury problems here and there. But for us to be where we are, a top 5 team in the country, no matter what poll you look at, right? AP, coaches, college football playoff, which is the one that matters at this point. We are a top 5 team. We've also only won a single game by single digits. All of the other wins were by 2 touchdowns or more. And now we are setting up for what is possibly the biggest game we've ever played in, a top 5 matchup on the road at Ohio State. And we're going to get to that game. We're going to get there in just a little bit and talk about it all week long, right? But you look at what this represents and what Indiana was able to do here by locking down Curt Cignetti, right? We had a big episode last week talking about why Indiana had to make this happen and why they had to make it happen right now. Because I said it and I still believe it. There are 25 to 30 Division I Power 4 schools that if you could ask them behind closed doors without it leaking out and you said, hey, would you get rid of your current head coach to hire Curt Cignetti? Would you do that right now if you had the chance to do it? They would have said yes. They would have said yes, which is why I think Indiana used the bye week while they were prepping and getting healthy and things like that. Indiana, the university and the athletic department said, hey, let's take advantage of this little bit of downtime that we have. And let's make sure that Curt Cignetti doesn't go anywhere. And that's exactly what they did. Again, 8 years, $72 million, the additional $1 million retention bonus every year. So it all averages out to about $8 million a year, which puts him in the top 20 ranking of highest paid coaches in America, top 4 of the Big Ten. So not too bad for a guy that just took his biggest job ever and came from James Madison, right? No disrespect. I'm saying good for this dude, right? He came up and he's winning. He's proven it. Google him. And now he's making big time bucks. But here's what you have to learn. And here's what you have to know is there's a couple caveats here, right? Because there are people who are, I don't know, concerned, right, with this. There are people that are worried. There were people like, why are we signing him to that long of a deal? That's 2032. Right? That's an entire new decade that he could be coaching here. You're going to pay him that much money? Yeah. How could you not? Look at what he's done already. And I get it. And I kind of am in that boat of, I'm not a huge fan of the super long contracts, right? 8 years is a little long for me. I agree with you if you're in that boat, if you're in that party. Totally understand. But in today's era of college football and college athletics, like, you've got to go pay somebody. You have to go pay them, because if you don't, somebody else will. And I hate that that is the world that we live in. Heck, that's the world with NIL too, right? You don't want to pay that quarterback? Cool. Somebody else will. And they'll leave, and they will. And that's how the world rolls. So Indiana saw this as an opportunity to possibly have the best 6, 7, 8 years of football that this program has ever seen, building off the best year that we've ever seen. And, there were people concerned with, well, what happens if he doesn't win any more games? Or what happens if he gets blown out by Ohio State? Or what happens if this is the best year that we have? Well, yeah, all of those things could happen. But aren't you willing to take the gamble and take the risk right now with an opportunity that has presented itself to you? Because let's be honest here. Who are you going to get that's better? If you're Indiana, like, if we are sitting down to look at this right now, who are we going to get that would be better than what Cignetti has done so far? Nobody. I mean, I don't think there's hardly any coach that would have come in here and then did come in here and then be so successful, right? Yeah, you could make the joke, oh, Nick Saban's out there. Okay, sure. But I'm talking legitimate, I don't know, a legitimate candidate who would be willing to come here, take over what the problems were here, and then turn it around so quickly. There was nobody else that could have done this. And so Indiana is saying, look, we got to plan for the future, and we got to do it right now. And that's exactly what they did with the 8-year, $72 million extension for Curt Cignetti. And with that, they've already started talking about more upgrades, facelift to Memorial Stadium, which all of those things are needed, which is something Curt Cignetti told them when he took this job. He said, look, we're going to need new facilities. We're going to need upgrades to our stadium. We're going to need better fan experiences, which they've already done. They've done some facility upgrades too. He basically made a list and said, this is what has to happen here. If you want me to be here, if you want us to be successful in this day and age of college football, I have to have these things. And here we go. So shout out to Scott Dolson and the Indiana Athletics Department, because they've done exactly what they were supposed to do. They found a good head coach. They've paid him. They're giving him what he wants. And look at what Indiana's doing. Currently in the best season in program history, and a chance to make that more this weekend against Ohio State.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. You could bet on Monday Night Football. The Houston Texans travel across the state to face the beleaguered Dallas Cowboys. 7-point favorites at Jerry World. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes.
Let's talk about on the field, right? The Colorado Buffaloes have won 8 games for the first time since 2016. Colorado, and it's only the second time in the past 20 seasons that they've won 8 games. They're 8-2 on the year. They've won 4 straight games for the first time since 2020, and everything's clicking, right? They have a clear path to the Big 12 title game. As I have been projecting when I go on Locked On College Football, I've been saying that BYU is going to lose. And BYU dropped their last game against Kansas, which is a little bit interesting that Kansas went from looking like one of the worst teams in the country to being within 2 points of Kansas State, beating number 17 Iowa State, and then beating number 13 Kansas, or beating number 6 BYU. So it's like, okay, what is with this Kansas team? And so I'll say this right now: Kansas is the best 4-6 team in the country, maybe. With that being said, the Colorado Buffaloes are hot, right? I think a lot of people got on me for saying this, and it wasn't me saying I didn't think that Colorado was good. This is me going off of what they were saying after the game. So Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders, they were like, you know what, we did not play our best game. It was just not what we needed against Utah, and they still won by 25 points. So I think that kind of shows where Colorado's at right now, because for you to win by 25 points, not be on your A game, I think that says a lot. And this Colorado team has improved dramatically on offense. The offensive line it's not the best, right? We're well aware that outside of Jordan Seaton, there haven't been very many bright moments for this group, but they're good enough, right? Isaiah Augusta, he didn't have any big runs, or excuse me, he didn't have a lot of major big runs on Saturday, except he goes 7 for 59, breaks off a 37-yarder. That was huge, right? He has a touchdown. Travis Hunter rushes in a touchdown as well, so the run game got things going a little bit. And then defensively, obviously you don't want to give up 24 points, and there's moments where it's like, okay, you gave up 15 second half points against a Utah offense that not the best, right? I don't think that anyone's going to mistake this Utah offense for being good. That being said, you still held them, you still outscored them 28-15 in the second half. So not bad at all. And realistically, when you look at what's happening on the field, you're getting, even if it's their best performance or not, you're getting strong performances from both the offense and defense, right? They forced, the defense is forcing turnovers at an elite clip right now. They forced 3 turnovers, which I think a lot of people don't realize how good this Colorado defense is. And if you just look at it from a total defense perspective, I think earlier weeks kind of hurt them, because obviously it's a bit accumulated, if you will. They ranked 59th in the country, which this is, I mean, a top 60 defense, not bad at all, right? But then when you go look at a little category called turnovers gained, Colorado's 10th in the country, right? Colorado has forced 20 turnovers this season, and I think realistically, they are one of the most improved units in all of college football, right? You can't go from being one of the worst defenses in college football to being one of the most effective and not be under consideration for that. They rank 6th in sacks per game. They have 33, which is an average of 3.3 sacks per game. So on the field, things are going great. The offense, we know, can ramp it up at any moment. The defense, as we've seen, is much improved, really stout, and I think both of these next 2 matchups, I think Colorado should be fine, right? I think Jalen Daniels is Kansas's lone hope to winning this game against Colorado, simply because he's kind of bouncing back now, and I don't really understand why. But against BYU, he didn't have a great game. He was 12 and 19 for 169 yards, and an interception. So it's like, how are they winning these games? Well, a couple, like, it was a little fluky, right? Devin Neal rushing touchdown in the first quarter. BYU's offense, I think, was the problem in this one, right? You only scored 13 points against Kansas. Kansas only scored 2 touchdowns, right? It was 10-13 in the fourth quarter. Then Kansas added another touchdown. So that BYU team always looked fraudulent to me, and this Kansas team, I don't think they're that much better. I think they're just kind of, I think it was a matter of time for BYU to lose more so than Kansas. And the same thing about Iowa State. And so as long as Colorado is on their P's and Q's, they should be fine. Now let's talk about off the field. If you guys weren't aware, Julian Lewis, the 5-star quarterback, who's been committed to USC for like over a year now, he officially backed off his USC pledge. So USC flips Texas A&M quarterback Hassan Longstreet, 5-star, and Julian Lewis, who, as we all know, is Colorado's top target, is on the market. And Colorado has multiple crystal balls in their favor to land him, and I think it's going to work out for them, right? You just look at his recruitment, and Georgia got a late visit. It kind of reminds me when Ohio State got a random, or Maryland, if you will, either one, got a late visits from Jordan Seaton. I think Julian Lewis is just kind of playing a little bit of games here because I think Coach Prime and staff encouraged the games. I'm going to be honest, or maybe he just wanted to take in a really good Georgia game, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like, he's a young kid. Like, why wouldn't he want to go to a Georgia game that's playing against a top 25 opponent? But Colorado is favored to land Julian Lewis. So not only are they thriving on the field, but off the field, they're projected to land their quarterback of the future, which has been the biggest question about this program, because it's like, if they don't land a quarterback of the future, aka Julian Lewis, does Deion Sanders stick around, right? Does he want to stay for a program that is going to have to rely on the transfer portal? I think a lot of signs point to him staying. I think right now the job market, this is for everyone, right? Because I know a lot of people were saying that he says he never wants to leave, and I get that. And Rick George said he's happy here too. No coach is ever going to publicly be like, yeah, I'm here for a little bit and then I'm going to leave, right? Nobody says that. With that being said, we just have to use logic here. There's not going to be any jobs that open, that at least that I can see right now, that are upgrades for Deion Sanders and Colorado, right? Florida State's not going to open because Mike Norvell, they would have to pay him a king's ransom to not coach football. Plus, he already fired a couple members of his staff, so they're giving him another shot to run it back. Florida has already announced that they're sticking with Billy Napier. And then Dave Aranda at Baylor, they're sticking with him as well. Mac Brown at North Carolina, I don't know the deal there, but is North Carolina an upgrade? No. So there's not really any jobs that are opening where I'm like, okay, that's where I'd be worried about. And then unless like Dan Lanning goes to Oregon and Oregon's like, hey, Coach Prime, come on over to Oregon. But I don't foresee Dan Lanning leaving Oregon for an NFL job when he could have left for Alabama and he chose not to. So either way, I don't think there's any jobs open right now or going to open that are intriguing enough to Deion Sanders. And plus the NFL stuff is killing me because I don't think a man can say, like, I have no interest in the NFL. I have no interest in following my sons more than Deion Sanders has, and still be asked about the NFL. I don't get it, but hey, people got to ask the questions, I guess, right? Like, it's almost like a weekly thing now. It's like, okay, Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys lost. Let's ask Deion Sanders about it. Like, what are we doing? Like, Colorado, they're thriving. Needless to say, Coach Prime's doing a great job.
Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
We all know the illegal formation was ridiculous. I'm not going to count that. Even without that, they had 8 penalties for 84 yards. And it wasn't just that they had these penalties. They were loud penalties. They're taking points off the board, like the Jane Harrison touchdown I referred to earlier. Like, Pat Coogan just straight up grabbed a dude's face mask as soon as he stabbed the ball. And then I was getting a kick out of the fact that he was going to the officials after. I was like, what do you say? Even if it was accidental, like, he literally gripped his face mask immediately. And I think that's the most frustrating thing about it is it didn't really impact the play at all. It wasn't like he was getting beat. It was just a stupid move. So that was frustrating. I felt like Notre Dame as a whole was a bit sloppy in this one, even on defense, even in the game when they forced 4 turnovers plus 1 on special teams. They need to tighten up a little bit, and I think the penalties is a good place to start.
Yeah, it definitely is. And Pat Coogan did not have a great game on Saturday in general. And it's funny because when I was walking the tailgate lots, I saw about 40 people in Coogan jerseys. So I'm wondering if the senior day nerves of having all of the south side of Chicago in town got to him a little bit.
Yeah, that's tough for him. He's been really good this season, but yeah, just not his best game on Saturday.
Yeah. And speaking of the other thing I want to get on, there's just a lot of offensive unevenness is what I'll call it. Notre Dame went 1-12 on third down. Number of drops, as you already mentioned, and I think you said this on your show yesterday. Notre Dame leads the top 25 in drops, despite being third to last in passes attempted amongst the top 25. That's just unacceptable and something that has to get cleaned up. But at this point, it's like, it doesn't feel like something that is going to get cleaned up. It's just, I don't know what it is. Lack of attention to details, just bad hands, whatever, but it's annoying. And further on the offensive unevenness point, what was most frustrating to me was that Notre Dame was clearly trying to extend the lead to 42-7. They went for it on fourth down like 20 times, and they simply could not punch the ball in against what is a really bad Virginia defense, and that just needs to get cleaned up going into the stretch run.
They had one of the worst red zone defenses in the country.
Yeah, and to be fair, Notre Dame did punch it in on their first 4 red zone drives, but that last one, it was like, whoa, what is going on here?
Yeah, it didn't look pretty. That's the thing about this Notre Dame offense is when it's not working, it is ugly.
Yeah.
It's one thing if you're not putting points up on the board, but if you're moving the ball pretty effectively and then you just have some drives stall out, that's one thing. But especially at the beginning of the game, they were going 3 and out. There was just nothing doing there. They put themselves in bad spots because they tried to throw it on first down. They couldn't complete it or it would go for no gain, and then they'd have 3rd and 1,000,000, and they weren't able to convert. So that's one thing about this offense, man. Like, their mistakes are loud, and it actually makes it feel so much worse. But when you look at the stat sheet and you're like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Plus, you had, the points taken off the board and all that stuff. But I'm with you. It was not the best game from the offense. It was the first time in several weeks where it felt like they didn't take a step forward.
100%. And that's not what you want to see going into 2 pretty big games down the stretch here. So hopefully this is a bit of a wake-up call and they can wake up now.
Yeah, because they've got, statistically, a really good defense coming their way on Saturday in Army. They're second in the country in scoring defense. Now, obviously, they have not played a very competitive schedule, but they have some dudes on that defense, and Notre Dame's offense is going to have to come ready to play because they're probably not going to have a ton of possessions in this one. But one last thing I didn't like from this game before we move on to the CFP and we start looking ahead here, the inconsistency in the kicking game. Because for once, it looked like James Rundell finally figured it out as a punter. He absolutely bombed one in this game. He looked really good. I think he won the game ball for MVP. Or no, he won the game ball for special teams in this game. I thought it was his best game of the season. It's like, all right, now Notre Dame is finally figuring it out in the punting game. And this kicking game is a nightmare. They're throwing out random dudes. They might find someone on the inner hall. Well, I guess inner hall doesn't exist anymore. RIP. But it is bad, man. It is really bad. And what I really did not like, Marcus Freeman said in his press conference on Monday that they basically determined in the pregame that his long was 40 yards, which means he's still hurt. And even though he went out there for some extra points, he's just not going to be healthy again this season because even if he doesn't feel pain, I think mentally he's just not going to be there. And I think that is just such a big part of kicking field goals. If you are not mentally confident that you can knock them in and you go weeks and weeks and weeks without kicking a meaningful field goal, that is going to be on your mind when you do actually have to kick one. So I think it's a major concern for Notre Dame that they just cannot kick field goals right now.
It is. It's a huge concern, and they're lucky it hasn't come back to bite them yet because, I didn't even really realize in the moment that they threw a third guy out there, Diomede, who even is that? I don't know, but it's not pretty right now. And anytime they go out there for a field goal, I have no confidence that it's going to go in.
None. I mean, now the 54-yarder, I wouldn't have had confidence if it were Mitch Jeter out there. But when Yoakum goes out there for a 36-yarder and you're like, I don't feel good about this, that's not really a great place to be, especially in late November.
No, certainly not.
You got any more thoughts in this game before we move on to the CFP?
I don't. I don't think it's going to be a game we're going to talk about too often moving forward. Just kind of one more ACC game that Notre Dame had to get through, and they got through it. Another year undefeated against the ACC.
Hang the banner.
Yeah.
All right. Where do you think Notre Dame is going to be ranked in the CFP rankings that come out later tonight?
So I've got them at 8th. I don't think they're going to move, and this is why I have it Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Indiana at 5, and then I have Alabama and Georgia jumping Notre Dame, going to 6 and 7. I have Ole Miss just behind Notre Dame at 9, Tennessee at 10, Miami at 11, Boise at 12, BYU at 13, and SMU at 14. That would have Notre Dame as the 10 seed playing 7 seeded Indiana. And the reason I have this is because I do think there's a desire to get Alabama and Georgia back up there. And Notre Dame lost a critical, win off their schedule, essentially, with Jeff Brom masterclass losing in Palo Alto to Stanford, which is just an absolutely horrible loss. And now Notre Dame just has one ranked win on its schedule. they'll have 2 after this week. They beat Army, but then Army probably won't be ranked. So I think Alabama and Georgia are likely to jump Notre Dame. And you might ask, well, why wouldn't Ole Miss then, or why wouldn't Ole Miss be ahead of Georgia? Well, they're not in the AP poll. Georgia's ahead of Ole Miss now too, despite the fact that they kind of took them to the curb a week ago. It doesn't seem to be a lot of rhyme or reason or consistency with these things, but I think this is the week you see Alabama and Georgia jump Notre Dame.
Yeah, I have Notre Dame at 6. I guess I'm giving the committee too much credit and thinking that they will just kind of continue with what they did last week. Alabama hammered Mercer this weekend. Hang another banner for them for that one.
Hey, they were 9-1.
That's true. That's true. They were a good Mercer team, as you pointed out last week. If they do jump Notre Dame, I won't be surprised at all. Georgia looked really good in that win over Tennessee. That was the least shocking thing ever for them to come out, backs against the wall, home game for the first time in over a month. They came out, they were ready to go. And yeah, that Louisville loss was a disaster, dude. Louisville was up 14 points in the fourth quarter and lost in regulation to Stanford. 2-7 Stanford. That is disgusting. And especially if you had Louisville minus 20.5, which I may have.
Yeah, and then the game was tied with 45 seconds left, and they went for it on 4th and 10. Did not get it, and then had 20 yards of penalties to set up Stanford for a game-winning 52-yard field goal. So
yeah, Stanford went out there. They were going to try to kick a 57-yard field goal to win the game.
In Stanford's defense, kicking is actually one of the things they do well. The kicker is good.
True, but it was a 57-yarder.
Yes.
And Louisville got an offsides penalty. What are you doing? Why are you even trying to block a 57-yarder? Just take the odds there. And then as soon as they called that flag, and it was blatant, by the way, this was not, I'm not criticizing the officials at all. Louisville had like 3 guys just running the backfield. I have never seen a more automatic 52-yarder ever. That was the most predictable thing. You're like, oh, Louisville just gave them 5 more yards. Now it's 52. That's still a bomb. But to your point, Stanford always has a good kicker. They do again this year, and he was nails. And that is a tough blow to Notre Dame's strength of schedule. It's not going to be like the difference between them, getting in or missing the playoffs or anything like that. But I do think that it could affect them seeding-wise. And they really need Texas A&M to keep winning. I don't think that they'd have Texas A&M jump Notre Dame if they end up with 3 losses. But we'll have to see. That's the only good win this team has right now.
It is, and it's definitely a little bit concerning. And I think you're hearing all these, just murmurs like, why isn't the SEC getting more respect here? Why is Notre Dame getting respect with the loss to NIU? And I can hear you out on that point. Like, that did still happen, right? But I think one of the things that is not getting appreciated or talked about enough is that this is a new format. It's a 12-teamer. Like, it's supposed to be more like the NFL, where you're allowed to have a game like that you just completely blow for whatever reason. Okay. Now you don't want to blow it to a middling MAC team. I get that, but it's a new format. And I'd like to hear some of this chatter go away. It's not going to anytime soon. I'm not delusional, but that's just kind of how I feel about it. It's a new format and we need to get used to it.
Yeah. I feel like the biggest issue here has less to do with the format and the fact that there's 18 teams in a conference and the schedule imbalance is so insane. Like what Texas has had to go through this season compared to what Georgia's had to face. It's not even close, man. And Texas is ranked 3rd. Georgia's ranked 8th, obviously because Georgia has 1 more loss. But there's a real issue. I mean, you look at what Indiana has done this year. They have had a cakewalk schedule. And I've defended them to an extent. I'm like, yeah, I know their schedule's been terrible, but I actually think this is a good football team. But we are going to find out on Saturday about IU. And I actually am with you now because I know that we've talked about this before where you were just like, this IU thing needs to stop because the people in Chicago, the alums, have been rather annoying. I'm getting there. They're getting a little too cocky for me.
Oh, yeah.
It sickens me to say I might root for Ohio State in this one, but Ohio State minus 12.5? That's speaking to me right now.
Yeah, and part of me wouldn't hate if Ohio State won 56-0. But the other side of this coin is, should the Fighting Cignetti somehow win this game, I think the conversation needs to change about Ohio State. It does. Because
Ryan Day might not leave the stadium.
Right. But at that point, their best win would be against a Penn State team who, by the way, row the boat. I can't believe I'm rooting for PJ Fleck this weekend, but I kind of hope Minnesota beats them. And I think the conversation would have to change about Ohio State. I'm sure they'd still get in with 2 losses, but that's something that you won't hear because of the helmet.
Dude, can you imagine if Ryan Day lost a home game to Indiana?
Am I switching sides here? I might be. I
can't even imagine how that fan base would react.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be ugly. It would
The
be
pitchforks
ugly.
would be out.
Yeah.
It'd be insane. All right. None of this really matters, though, if Notre Dame doesn't handle their business this weekend against Army. You got any initial thoughts on that one?
I think Notre Dame's going to roll. I think they may win by 30 to 40 points, to be honest.
Wow.
Army struggles against North Texas were eyebrow raising and not in a good way. The Irish always play well in these Shamrock Series games, and I don't anticipate this one being any different. And I don't think you're going to hear as much, Army could give Notre Dame a game just because of what Notre Dame did to Navy after that same dialogue happened. Now, granted, Navy has not played great since that game happened, but I think Notre Dame has way better players than Army does, and I don't think this one's going to be particularly close.
I think Notre Dame wins. I think they cover. I don't know if they'll win by 30 or 40 just because I don't think they'll have that many possessions, because even though Army isn't that great offensively, I mean, they put up 14 against North Texas. They only put up 20 against Air Force, but granted, their starting quarterback didn't play in that one. I just think that they're going to sit on the ball for a lot of the game, and I don't expect Notre Dame to have – how many turnovers did they have against Navy? Like 105?
Yeah, 60, something like that.
So that is a big reason why that score was so lopsided. I don't think that's going to happen this game, but who knows, man? This defense just forced 4 more turnovers, and they got another one on special teams this weekend. If that happens and Notre Dame wins the turnover battle by that significant of a margin again, then yeah, Notre Dame's probably going to win this game by 30. But I just have a feeling it might be in jeopardy until about like the third quarter, and then Notre Dame will pull away because they are better in seemingly every phase of this game.
Yeah, you could be right. I just think Notre Dame's going to speed up Army just the same way they did Navy, almost like that analogy I used with the full court press with a team that's just not used to it, and I think that might cause some uncharacteristic mistakes.
You're going, right?
I will be there, yeah. Night game at Yankee Stadium. It sounds like there's going to be a huge Notre Dame contingency there. Should be a very fun weekend in the city that never sleeps, so definitely looking forward to that.
This will be your third game in Yankee Stadium?
Second. I went to Syracuse in 2018. That was another whooping, led by you had Giants legend Tommy DeVito coming in relief in that one, and didn't make a difference.
No, it did not. You missed out on the Pinstripe Bowl?
Shockingly, didn't hit that one or Army in 2010 either, but I think that's okay.